Okay, we are expecting the permanent secretary of the Ministry of National Archives, National Diversity and Social Integration. The ministries change so often that sometimes you forget. To join us. She's not here as yet, so Avril is waiting outside to bring her in. So right now, I will just like to, before I even say that, please note that everything is being filmed. So if at any point in time anyone has a problem with being on candid camera, please say so. I'm still going to call her name, but Joy Prasad Myers, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of National Diversity and Social Integration. Dr. David Sutton of the University of Reading, who spearheaded this Diasporic Literary Archives Network. Ms. Jennifer Joseph and staff of the University of the West Indies. Ms. Lucia Phillip and staff of the National Library and Information Systems Authority, representatives from the University of the West Indies, Mona and Cave-Hill campuses, Ms. Avril Belfort and staff of the National Archives of Trinidad and Tobago, Ms. Martha Preddy and staff of the University of Trinidad and Tobago, the partners of this exciting network, Professor Alison Donnell and the rest of the staff at the University of Reading. And the partners of this network include the Benecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library at Yale University, the Centro Manoscritto, my accent is not very good, but the University of Pavia, Italy, the Institute Memoir Edition Contemporain, the IMEC of France, and the National Library and Archive Service of Namibia. These are the partners of this network. Jans Bol, the Chief Archivist of UNESCO, representative from the University of Toronto, Jennifer Toes, representative from the University of Dundee, representative from Long Island University, members of CABICA, Cheryl Sylvester, representative of St. George's University, Dominique Taffar, director of the National Archives of Martinique, specially invited authors and publishers, other distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is with great pleasure that I warmly welcome you all this morning to the opening ceremony of the fourth in a series of 5 workshops of the Diasporic Literary Archives Network. This workshop is entitled The Politics of Location. Those of you who have never visited Trinidad and Tobago, I also take this opportunity to welcome you to the beautiful Isle of Trinidad and Tobago, where our cultural diversity is one of a kind in the Caribbean. This is a historic event in the history of Trinidad and Tobago. These workshops are the beginning of activities which will enable the region and by extension the world to participate in a project that is invaluable to all of us. I know that most of you have experience in appraising, preserving, and even creating your own archives. Some of you will have had the opportunity to see literary archival collections from the tour at the University of the West Indies yesterday. I wish to just mention that it is truly wonderful that Professor Ram Chan is presenting here today, and perhaps he will tell you about his involvement in collections of this nature. In welcoming you to this workshop, it is my hope that we will all have a clearer vision as we plan and address the various issues and challenges of literary archives in the diaspora. I firmly believe that there will be a great deal of success stories in the years ahead relating to literary archives in this Diasporic Literary Archives Network. I thank you. I will now like to invite Professor Alison Donnell of the University of Reading to the podium.
Good morning. I'm going to echo all of the thanks and say a few more words. As Helena said, thank you to everybody for coming to this, the fourth of 5 Diasporic Literary Archive workshops. The focus of this workshop is on the politics of place and location and brings us really to the heart of many of the challenges around the network's areas of focus, access, belonging, and interpretation. So I'm Alison Donnell. I'm Professor of Modern Literatures in English at the University of Reading and the head of the School of Literature and Languages. But most of all, and I do feel it to be most of all, I'm blessed to be a Caribbeanist by training and by inclination. And my research has focused for a long time on Caribbean literary archives. I actually brought along my reading card from 1989 for the St. Augustine collection that we visited yesterday. And I'm currently trying to develop a research project on Caribbean authorship and its archives, which I hope will be a collaborative venture involving a lot of colleagues gathered here today. And also, I'm planning a special issue of Caribbean Quarterly on Caribbean literary archives. So I'm just saying that as a sense of, if people are interested, please come and talk to me about that. One of the main objectives, really, of the network is bring together a group of established scholars and experts from a variety of institutional backgrounds. And it seems to me that we've been very kind of successful both in being able to do that and also in the kind of outcomes of that. And I just want to take the opportunity to say that this is very much a kind of, a workshop in spirit, and that although we have a lot of presentations, we're really open to people contributing who aren't presenting today. For me, this is a kind of special occasion. My thanks, of course, to the dignitaries who've joined us today. Mrs. Joy Passab-Myers, the Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of National Diversity and Social Integration. And also, my thanks to Helena, Leonce of the University of Trinidad and Tobago for being a kind of fantastic co-organizer on this venture. To Lucia Phillip from NALES, Avril Baum from the National Archives of Trinidad and Tobago. But also this event's quite special for me because there's lots of people connected to my intellectual history and my professional present. It's been a delight for me. It's the first time that I've been able to travel to the Caribbean with my colleagues from Reading. I'm normally disappearing off and they're kind of going, oh. So it's really lovely to have them here. I am really, truly honoured that we'll hear shortly from Professor Kenneth Ramchand, who's not only an undergraduate hero of mine, but actually shaped the direction of my postgraduate scholarship and is truly the founding father of West Indian literary criticism. Likewise, I know we'll be joined shortly by Professor Evelyn O'Callaghan from the Cave Hill campus, whose work on early Caribbean narratives and on women's writing has also been very foundational. And I know also that there are other colleagues joining us, Jean-Antoine Kim Robinson from the University of the West Indies, and fellow Caribbeanists from other institutions in the US and UK, particularly colleagues and collaborators of mine, Gail Lowe and Maria McGarity. But also as an academic, I just want to take one moment to give special thanks to librarians and archivists, without whose assistance and patience and endurance over the years, those of us who actually kind of, want to work in literary archives and ask often terribly naive and annoying questions repeatedly, wouldn't be able to do our work. So a kind of collective thank you. And also to the network partners with whom conversations across different cultural landscapes have been enriching and enlightening. Trinidad seems to me to be a particularly kind of fitting location for this workshop, as its national subjects today are all arguably diasporic in their histories. The accelerated globalization and tricontinentalism that occurred in the brutal crucible of the transatlantic slave trade and the subsequent indentureship system brought Africa, India, China, and Europe into each other's orbits in order to generate capital. Yet happily, one of the most celebrated, unexpected, and transformative outcomes of that history has been the rich and innovative cultural capital that's emerged from across the Caribbean region. with 2 Nobel laureates, V.S. Naipaul and Eric Walcott, and a literal kind of, host of other talented and inventive authors, Trinidad and the West Indies punches well above its weight in literary talent. All the same, the high value of its syncretic, creolized cultural outputs within a global literary marketplace often remains in contrast with the fragile cultural infrastructure within the region. And I'm thinking here from libraries to publishing companies to bookshops. And the pull of the metropolis and the global north remains strong. And that might give us one line of inquiry for our thoughts. The situation for the repositories in the Caribbean is itself, as we'll hear across the next 2 days, pretty uneven. The literary archives at UE St Augustine that we visited yesterday, and thanks to those colleagues especially, are clearly highly prized, secure for the future and accessible. In the Francophone and Dutch Caribbean, there are excellent archival facilities too, but there is still no library in Grenada and Antigua, and the fact that the museum is kind of functioning in both of those places as a kind of makeshift library and archive suggests something about the relationship there between the past, present and future. And I would just like to say to you all that I've included in the conference packs an update from Mel Collins on the situation in Grenada and a leaflet about an organisation called GrenLib, which is trying to mobilise support for the reopening of a public library and archive. So I'd appreciate it if you could all have a look at that, and if anybody wants to be in contact with Merle, I can offer you the details. So inevitably then, I guess we have to face the question, what are the consequences of outsourcing the management of Caribbean literary heritage? But also try to ask, what might the alternatives of that be? We might ask what it means for the papers of an island's most famous or infamous writer to be housed far away, as in the case of V.S. Naipaul, whose papers are deposited in the McFarlane Library at the University of Tulsa, Oklahoma, with only the Dominican Jean Rees for company. That question becomes particularly pertinent when we know, as was brilliantly brought to light yesterday by Lorraine Nero's paper, how interconnected and tightly networked West Indian writers of Naipaul's generation were, and how productive the act of reading across literary archives can be. And that was even, a brief glimpse into the one act of reading across. And obviously, within the West Indiana collection more generally, you could read across those literary archives into oral archives, into all kinds of other, eventually material archives like jewelry, recipes, carnival. So I guess also on top of that, we have the question, does it make a difference to the politics of location if an archive is part of a wider repository of New World black memory that's often simultaneously a counter-archive to traditional accounts of authorship and maybe even to Western modernity's idea of itself? How would we capture and render those values or those structures of feeling? Obviously, these are really complex and often highly charged questions that I'm not suggesting we'll have the answers to at the end of 2 days. But all the same, they summon, importantly, I think, the significance of intangible heritage that's generated both by and beyond the material histories found in literary archives, and that often deeply inform the politics of their location. Our network aims to promote international collaboration in the preservation of and access to literary archives, and I think collectively we've already made some important interventions in terms of Caribbean writings that will be discussed during the course of the next 2 days. One of our main objectives was, to set conversations in motion. It's certainly been my experience that this has been a really productive and fruitful network, and I'd just like to end by saying thank you to everybody, and I really look forward to working with you the next 2 days. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague, David Sutton.